Just in that period of time that we haven't had a budget, interest on our debt is $439 billion in 804 days. And we've accumulated during this time an additional $3.2 trillion in debt, $3,200 in debt. And during the past 2 years, under the super Democratic majority here in the Senate and in the House, 60 Democratic senators and the President's leadership, the discretionary non-defense spending went up 24%. And the President proposes in his budget next year to increase the Education Department, the State Department, the Energy Department, the Transportation Department, double-digit increases again, when this year 40 cents of every dollar we spend is borrowed. So I'm glad my colleagues can be with me now and really would ask, I see Senator Johnson's a member of the Budget Committee. We had more people want to get on the Budget Committee this year, the new senators that were recently elected. Senator Johnson was one of the few to be selected. Many were not able to get on the committee, and they hope to make a difference and to confront the problems that we faced. Senator Johnson, you're a successful businessman. You just joined the Senate last year. How have you felt to date about the process?
Well, Senator Sessions, appreciate the kind words. My background is in accounting, and I have been in business for 34 years, and I've produced budgets for people on time. I've had people produce budgets for me on time. And I look at the process, or the lack of a process here, as absurd. Now we have the President, at least he's finally got engaged last week. And they're meeting behind closed doors. And is it really true that they're going to produce a budget over the course of a couple meetings? A budget for the federal government that would be $3.7 trillion? I am glad the President finally acknowledged that Medicare is unsustainable. That's a sad fact. I wish it weren't so. But the first step, of course, in any process of being healed is to acknowledge you have a problem. So I'm glad the President finally acknowledged that Medicare is unsustainable. But if he was really serious about structural reform, if he was really coming to the table in good faith, Senator Sessions, he would have come to the table 6 months ago. He would have been sitting down in good faith with Republican senators, Republican members of Congress, who understand how urgent the problem is, who want to work with this President, who want to work with anyone who is willing to seriously address the fact that we're bankrupting this nation.
Not one Republican, not one Democrat would vote for President Obama's budget. We hear rumblings that the chairman of the Senate, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, may be actually about to bring a budget forward. It's been 800 days. We passed the 800-day mark last week. The budget chairman and the budget committee and the process has failed to work to actually bring a budget out to the floor, back from out from behind closed doors, as my friend from Wisconsin had said, and let us vote on all of these procedures. So I would simply say the President's budget was a non-starter. I think if the Senate Democratic version ever were to be devised and brought to the fore, it would be a non-starter, which is why we haven't seen such a proposal in 800 days. Bottom line, Republicans are united on this side in resisting tax increases on our economy at a time when we are at 9.2% unemployment. And we're united, all 47 of us, in saying we need the basic change in the process in this country of enacting a balanced budget amendment, sending that amendment out to the states for ratification. That would be the type of process reform that I think the American people agree that we need.
Senator Lee, maybe you would share your thoughts about your observation as a new senator on how things are going and why you believe a constitutional amendment, as Senator Wicker from Mississippi has just said, would be helpful for our country and help put us on a sound path for the future.
Madam President, the need has never been greater for us to avoid gimmicks. Gimmickry in this context can have very high stakes and can prove most detrimental to our economy and to the ability of our government to function. We have to look out for those gimmicks that would say, we're going to make a few cuts now, but most of the cuts we're going to propose in return for our ability to raise the debt limit will involve sacrifices by future Congresses. Not the 112th Congress, we'll just make a few. But we'll say that the 113th and the 114th and successive Congresses after that will make the difficult, necessary sacrifices. We can't do that. Nothing allows us to bind a future Congress. That's why we need something that's gimmick-free. That's why we need to amend our law of laws, the U.S. Constitution, to place important, meaningful, permanent restrictions on the ability of Congress to engage in perpetual, reckless deficit spending.
I thank you, Senator Lee, for your leadership and hard work on that. It's not an easy thing to draft something but that people would all agree with, but you've got I think the Republicans have signed on to that, you and your colleagues, and we are happy for that, and I believe that this is not an impossible dream. When I came to the Senate in 1997, we had a vote on a balanced budget amendment. It fell one vote short. We had 66, it required 67. How much better off would we have been today? How much less debt would we have placed on our children and grandchildren had that amendment been passed then? So I do think it's time for a national discussion again on this issue and to make that change. Senator Wicker, you've been here in the House and in the Senate. Have you seen a situation in which our financial crisis, short-term and long-term, systemically, is more severe than it is today?
Well, I don't think we could have imagined an annual deficit of $1.5 trillion in one short year. Republicans and Democrats over time, until recently, have been united in saying tax increases are a bad thing to do. And I want to ask my colleagues if any of you can help identify the public official who said this quote, "The last thing you want to do is to raise taxes in the middle of a recession because that would take more demand out of the economy and put businesses in a further hole," unquote. Now, would any of my colleagues care to guess, Senator Lee?
That was President Obama in the middle of 2009 who made that comment.
Absolutely. Somehow, the president, who made a very cogent and correct statement in 2009, has completely changed his tune now. We could have a budget deal in place on the floor of the House and Senate and ready to be passed if the President of the United States would simply come back to the position that he took in 2009 and 2010. As late as December of 2010, the President was telling the New York Daily News that we should keep the tax rates in place. The budget chairman in the Senate told Reuters last July, only a year ago, that he supported extending the tax cuts and keeping them in place because to raise taxes on the private sector during a time of economic downturn is taking money out of the private sector and killing their ability to create jobs. So I would simply call on my colleagues from the other side of the aisle to return to the position that they had a year ago and 2 years ago. Let's get a budget deal that addresses the debt by cutting spending and go and be united as we were on that issue some year and 2 years ago.
Senator Johnson, You're, as I recognize, a businessman. President Clinton recently said we need to reduce our corporate tax rate. I was on a TV show with Senator Bill Nelson, my good Democratic colleague, who said we ought to reduce some of these tax expenditures, some call them, the kind of things that Senator Klobuchar, I think, mentioned. My understanding was that we could use that to help get our rates down so we're more competitive worldwide and create more jobs. Now, I guess my question to you is, if you take if you simplify the tax code, you eliminate gimmicks, should the money be applied, as President Clinton suggested, to reducing our rates so we're more competitive, or should they be used to subsidize more spending by Washington?
Well, obviously, it makes more sense to actually use them to make us more competitive so that global capital actually flows in the United States to create jobs here. And I'm often asked, are you surprised about anything in Washington? I'll tell you one thing I'm not surprised is that their solution is increasing taxes. I mean, let's face it, we just undertook a $4 trillion experiment in Keynesian economics. We're down more than 2 million jobs since that grand experiment began when President Obama became elected. It doesn't work. And now for the Democrats, President Obama is proposing $1 trillion, $2 trillion, or as you point out, as much as $2.8 trillion in new taxes. And what is that? That is actually taking money out of the private sector where real jobs are created. That would be the wrong direction. That would be a big mistake. And that's why Republicans are united in saying increasing taxes at any time, particularly in a weak economy, is the wrong prescription. Getting our debt and deficit and spending under control, a balanced budget amendment, that's the solution. It can actually be enacted very quickly. We don't have to face a crisis that President Obama and Treasury Secretary are trying to whip up here.
Well, Madam President, I would just say that I do believe we are at a national crisis with our debt. The Congressional Budget Office, our nonpartisan accountants who are pretty good, they have calculated what the interest payment would be in the 10th year of that 10-year budget. And they have concluded that the interest payment that year would be $940 billion. That's larger than Medicare. That's larger than Medicaid. That's larger than Social Security. That's larger than the defense budget. These numbers are incredibly large, and you cannot, as a gentleman told me at a town hall meeting, borrow your way out of debt. We cannot keep spending. It's dragging down our economic growth right now. It's costing jobs right now. And there are some people that say, well, we didn't have enough jobs, we need to spend more. And where are we going to get that money? Borrow that money. We're already borrowing 40 cents of every dollar we spend. Can we afford to borrow more to try to get a sugar high, keep growth artificially growing now? I think we just have to be mature, grown up, and realize that we're going to have to work our way out of this fix. So I'm glad the President is working now. We've got to somehow together develop a strategy to put us on a course that all Americans and the business community in our country, the world financial community will say, boy, the United States are getting their act together. They're making the right decisions. They're on a sound course now. Maybe that's where we need to put our money instead of some other place, because they're on the right path. But right now it's very dangerous.